Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on October 7th, 2024. This meeting included comments and discussion about accepting a state grant for community-based crisis response, reducing standards for the transit corridor zoning district, allowing more height and eliminating stormwater review for new developments, amending terms of the Home Energy Rating Disclosure Ordinance, expanding the Nondiscrimination Ordinance to include the right to sit, a Brownfield plan to support development of a hotel on Huron Street, and directing future allocations of county millage rebate funds. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on October 7th, 2024. One item was postponed. All other items were approved. There was one split vote on amendments to standards in the transit corridor zoning district. All other votes were unanimous. You can find this voting chart and more information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included a presentation from Stephanie Carter, Chair of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, or ICPOC.
I wanted to let you know about NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Some of us are attending the conference, which will be, as a matter of fact, next week. We'll be attending that. I've asked that the commission take a look at the NACOL Code of Ethics and that we approve it at our next meeting.
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for a little over an hour. 15 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 9 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 10 items and expenditures of just over $2 million. One item was pulled for discussion. Council discussed a $483,000 grant from the Michigan State Police for community-based crisis response. This item appeared and was removed from 3 previous council meeting agendas. This week, questions to the agenda highlighted concerns about this grant, specifically that terms of state review and audit could violate the privacy and confidentiality of individuals. Staff offered introduction and explanation.
There is no intent from the state to do any kind of records review that would invade the privacy of Ann Arbor residents. From a technical standpoint, we will have the ability to redact anything that should not be reviewed.
Council members weighed in.
And I think the important thing that I want the community to know about this program is this grant, while it comes from the Michigan State Police, it is not a program designed by the Michigan State Police.
The grant and all other items on the consent agenda were approved unanimously. Council then considered ordinance amendments that will change multiple standards in the transit corridor zoning district. These amendments were requested by developers Crawford Hoying and Oxford Companies. The amendments remove multiple guidelines in the transit corridor district, eliminating previous limits on curb cuts, eliminating minimum building frontage, eliminating guidelines for the placement of housing in close proximity to signaled intersections, eliminating a requirement that larger parcels be divided into smaller blocks, and eliminating guidelines for the location of off-street parking and parking structures. At a public hearing earlier in the evening, a commenter spoke.
I think increasing the number of curb cuts to sort of dumb it down to what's the existing citywide standard would be a mistake, and that if anything, we should leave this in place and raise the standard for for the rest of the city to match TC1. This could allow very low density, just kind of 2-story buildings to be oriented not to the street, but sort of internally with a large parking lot.
Council discussed the issue for about 20 minutes with explanation from staff.
The guiding principle behind these changes come from Ann Arbor's recent economic development report, which emphasized to this body that very narrowly tailored development standards, whether they are in the UDC or in PUD requirements, are overly restrictive, often unnecessarily complicated, and generally increase the cost of development in the city.
The modifications to TC1 are pretty drastic, and they're in conflict with some of the basic principles of walkability. So just drawing from the Congress of New Urbanism, they stress the importance of one small block size. They note that the average block size in a walkable place should be no more than 6 acres, preferably 2 to 3 acres or even smaller.
With minimum and maximum front setbacks and with building sizes, maximum diagonals, that those places, they may not meet the 60 or 70% buildage frontage standard, but the development is very pedestrian friendly, still very friendly to pedestrians. It is possible without the building frontage requirements, or even with them, because they are currently set at 70%, that you can get a parking lot next to a building.
I really want us to remember that we all signed off on and were delighted to receive an economic development report that told us that we make things too complicated.
The ordinance amendments were approved in a split vote, with council members Briggs, Cornell, Ackman, and Watson voting against. At first reading on September 3rd, these amendments were approved unanimously. Without discussion, council voted unanimously to postpone ordinance amendments that would increase allowable height and reduce stormwater management review for new developments. Council considered amendments to the Home Energy Rating Disclosure Ordinance, which requires home sellers to disclose information about energy use when marketing a property. At a public hearing earlier in the evening, local realtors weighed in.
It's premature to tinker with the execution of this ordinance. There's been a grace period between when the ordinance was put into effect and when fines would be assessed. Within that time, it has become apparent that the city has not effectively communicated what it expects of its home sellers. The training we've been receiving for 6 months will now be made obsolete, and the level of compliance we had in those 6 months will inevitably go down as we change the compliance rules mid-adoption.
Council members, if you are serious about increasing compliance with the HURD ordinance to help meet our A20 goals, I urge you not to make any changes at this time and instead partner with local realtors on any future proposed changes.
Council discussed it and accepted a friendly amendment.
So I move to strike 8:396 1.b.2. The rest of the changes in the red line documents clarify but do not change the requirements.
These are not wholesale changes, but rather are changes in the vein of clarifications and removals of potential loopholes.
The ordinance amendments were approved unanimously. Council considered an expansion of the Nondiscrimination Ordinance to add a right to sit in workplaces where sitting does not interfere with job performance. Earlier in the meeting, public commenters spoke to the issue.
Passing right to sit could open up opportunities for local businesses to talk about how they could still do a great job while lessening the cost of that effort on their employees' bodies.
The right to sit has protected my physical and mental health. Being able to sit while on the clock did not negatively affect the impact of my work, nor did it financially impact my employer.
This ordinance is about more than a place to rest. It's about recognizing that disability rights are indeed human rights. The ability to sit when needed is fundamental, and the well-being of residents is not just for people with disabilities who benefit, but whoever needs it, whether it's the elderly or a pregnant woman or somebody with a temporary injury.
Council discussed it for about 5 minutes.
People who feel that the ordinance isn't being observed can file a complaint to a city commission, in this case, the Human Rights Commission, with a form available online.
In Europe, they look on us as being strange for forcing cashiers to stand all day. They don't understand what we're doing.
Expansion of the non-discrimination ordinance was approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, it will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved 3 agenda items: a rezoning of 2 parcels on Huron River Drive, amendments to officially adopt a new city flag, and amendments to the Energy and Water Benchmarking Ordinance to allow more city staff to issue citations for violation. At a future meeting, these 3 items will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Council then considered a Brownfield award of almost $750,000 to the developer of a hotel on Huron Street. The hotel is located across the street from City Hall and is already under construction. Brownfield funds are a public subsidy for private development at locations impacted by pollution or contamination. Developers can receive tax abatements as reimbursement for the cost of environmental cleanup and redevelopment. This week, a staff memo explains that Brownfield plans are subject to specific standards of review. 2 of these standards were not met by the project on Huron Street. In order to receive Brownfield funds, a developer must demonstrate a funding gap, that the project would not be feasible without the benefit of Brownfield funds. Eligible projects must also demonstrate a need for Brownfield funds in order to achieve a reasonable return on investment. Staff explained that because it is already under construction, the hotel project cannot meet either of these standards. At a public hearing earlier in the evening, a public commenter spoke to the issue.
A brownfield plan is when a developer tells a community, I'd like to build here, but this land is contaminated and my project isn't viable unless I get some help. In this case, construction is well underway right across the street. We don't have a choice. It's really not a brownfield plan in my view. It's a $750,000 city taxpayer bailout dressed up as a brownfield plan. Staff argues we should still grant the TIF or we'll lose sustainability features like the efficient VTEC air conditioning units and rooftop solar. It's backwards reasoning, a form of self-extortion. We'd better pay or we'll lose what we have. Instead, let's ask this developer to step up and meet our city's climate standards. Finally, you may know that the County Brownfield Authority approved this plan last August, contingent on city approval. But Authority member James Harless said this, quote, "It will be up to the city to see if it meets their standards for sustainability. That's really not our role," end quote. So the county put the ball in your court.
Council discussed it for about 15 minutes with input from staff.
While the public commenter was right that this city council could say no to this, because it doesn't isn't the ideal project in terms of our goals around the environment. By increasing the amount of hotel availability and capacity in downtown, we are bringing tourists downtown, which has a ripple effect throughout our business community.
Seems pretty clear that this isn't, well, at least what I read from the staff report is it doesn't seem like this project is at threat of not being built.
For whatever reason, the contamination and the remediation necessary for it was not discovered until after the hole was being dug, and later in the process than is normally desired by us. It was really me, staff, and specifically me, who suggested this is the only way for us to achieve the look back possible to reimburse as much of the environmental activity as we can.
The developer offered explanation, and council responded.
We bought the property in 1995, and then there was another building there over time, but we didn't really have the history on it, and environmental folks weren't super curious about that at the time. We did everything, or everything was done at the gas station to get it to the place where we thought that the site was in a good spot to go forward. It turns out that the second lot, at one point in time, had a dry cleaner on it.
I think that this investment is in line with what Brownfield dollars were intended to do, and that we're using them to make the site cleaner, and they're helping to support a cleaner, more environmentally friendly building than we would get otherwise.
The Brownfield plan was approved unanimously. Council considered a resolution in support of an employee's right to sit with a last-minute amendment.
So the final resolved clause would read, resolved, the Ann Arbor City Council directs the Ann Arbor City Administrator to engage with the Michigan State Legislature to advocate for statewide legislation ensuring all workers the right to sit. Since our last council meeting, Rep. Dylan Wigela has introduced statewide legislation advocating for the right to sit, and I sincerely hope that it will receive the support it deserves and ultimately pass.
The resolution was approved unanimously. Council then considered a resolution declaring spending priorities for funds the city expects to receive from a county millage rebate. The money will be allocated to unarmed response, affordable housing support services, and bicycle and pedestrian safety. Earlier in the evening, public commenters spoke in support.
This funding supports Avalon case managers who help clients living in Ann Arbor Housing Commission properties overcome serious conditions that jeopardize their health and well-being and often their housing. These wraparound services are key to helping people stay housed.
It's a hugely significant contribution to the well-being of the people living in our community and in the Housing Commission properties. If the current trend of increasing housing costs continues, as we expect, the need for affordable housing and supportive services will only grow.
Without these funds, over 650 households would not receive the critical supportive services they need to permanently maintain their housing and thrive in the area we live.
Council made statements in support of the resolution for about 15 minutes.
This resolution is about making sure we have a safety net that supports mental health,
public safety, and long-term community stability in a way that is sustainable for years to come.
I appreciate this effort because it's funding that will come annually, and it's funding that's tied with a variety of services that our most vulnerable community members need, right? Supportive services, housing, substance abuse.
We're finding that it isn't as easy as we thought it would be to set up an unarmed crisis response program. And there are legal issues that we need to deal with, and there are organizational issues. But that work continues in earnest.
When I filled out my absentee ballot, I made sure that I voted yes on Washtenaw County Proposal 4. I would urge all of our residents to do so as well.
Council unanimously approved the resolution declaring spending priorities for the county millage rebate. Finally, Council considered a resolution to rename the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
It is a renaming, as we said, and it allows the DDA to have a little more flexibility in terms of who it is able to bring onto this advisory council by, again, not making it just citizens.
Council voted unanimously in support of renaming the committee Downtown Development Area Resident Consultancy Council. The meeting adjourned at about 9:45 with no further public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
C0 resolution to approve approval of issuance of new Class C quota liquor license in the city of Ann Arbor to Cella's Restaurant and Taqueria. Moved by Councilmember Udina, seconded by Councilmember Watson. Discussion, please, of C0. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. CA0. DC0, sorry. Goodness. I've skipped so many different things.
I think you skipped the DCs.
Yes, I did skip the DSs. Goodness. All right. Well, Ms. Kaur, I pulled it up. No one stopped me. And we passed it.
That's quite all right.
Out of order.
You can return to DS1, and when you get to DC, I would redo DC0.
And so we shall.